Arsenal kick off the Premier League season with a victory up at St James's Park and a clean sheet too. We'll be dissecting the game and taking your comments on it live on tonight's edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner. Hello, good evening, and welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast brought to you by the last man standing with loserpool.com. As ever, I'm your host, Harry Symeou, and this is another live edition of the podcast. We are live Sunday night, looking back at the victory over Newcastle United. Lots to discuss. Our first game of the season. Thank God Arsenal are back in Premier League action. Gives us something to do, something to talk about, and something to fill our weekends finally after feeling so empty for so long. Right, I'm going to start off actually by sharing with you guys what my predicted lineup was for this game. Now, my predicted lineup was Leno in goal, a back four of Monreal, Socrates, David Luiz and Maitland-Niles. Got 3 of the 4 right. I thought that David Luiz would start. I must admit, I thought that he'd come straight into the team. So I was surprised to see Callum Chambers given the nod, but Callum Chambers did really well, and we're going to come on to that a bit later on. I went with Xhaka, Willock, and Ozil. This was, of course, done prior to the announcement that Ozil and Kolasinac would both be missing. So swap Ozil for Guendouzi, and that's pretty much right. And the front 3 was spot on. It's what we expected. Pepe hasn't, made a full recovery from the African Nations Cup yet. He's not been in training long enough yet to be given a starting position. We know that Alexander Lacazette was also suffering with an injury problem and had to have a late fitness test. So the likelihood of him starting was also pretty low. So that was what I went with. Let's have a look what Arsenal actually went with. I've already spoken about it, but we'll go into things in a little bit more detail now. So if you look at it here, you should be able to see my screen now, those of you watching live, but I'll read it out for those who are not. Of course, the back 4 was, as we said, Leno, Maitland-Niles, Chambers, Socrates, Monreal. Guendouzi came in alongside Xhaka, Mkhitaryan, and Nelson were the wide players, with Willock just behind Aubameyang. Now, if we have a look at the statistics before we get into sort of the individual performances, Arsenal were pretty dominant in terms of possession. 62% of the possession compared to Newcastle United's 38%. So that's really, really good considering we were away from home. Interestingly enough, though, Newcastle had more attempts at goal than the Arsenal, and both teams only had 2 attempts on target. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the overall quality of the game was pretty poor, if I'm honest. Newcastle had more corners, 5 to Arsenal's 3, and Newcastle also committed more fouls. Now, if we flick back to the lineup, we're going to go through some individual performances, and I want to get you guys' thoughts on those too. So feel free to utilize the comment section, whether you're watching live on Facebook, live on Twitter, live on YouTube, or if you're watching or listening to the replay of this too, you are welcome to contribute as always. Now, Leno in goal for me, he didn't really have a great deal to do. Made a pretty decent save in the first half from Joe Linton when he squeezed through. So that was pretty good. But other than that, Leno wasn't really called into action. Ainsley Maitland-Niles I thought was brilliant. Now, I've been one of the people that thinks that Ainsley Maitland-Niles cannot be a right back option for Arsenal going forward. And the reason I say that is because it's not naturally his position. We've seen him get exposed many, many times. I felt like when he first broke into the team, he looked really, really good, really composed. And we saw a little bit of a regression with Ainsley Maitland-Niles. And I think that a lot of that was down to the fact that he was playing out of position. So in my mind, it didn't make sense to rely on Ainsley Maitland-Niles as a right back. Today, he shut me up because he was really, really good on that right-hand side. He showed great pace, and even, was it St. Maximin? Is that his name? The gentleman that came on for Newcastle in the second half, even when he came on, injected a little bit more pace, a little bit more directness. Ainsley Maitland-Niles was able to cope. And of course, he did brilliantly for the goal when he nipped in front of the Newcastle United man, broke forward, looked up and picked out a fantastic ball to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in the middle. And of course, Aubameyang made absolutely no mistake with the finish. So Ainsley Maitland-Niles deserves a lot of credit today. There's no question about that in my mind. Does it mean that I want to see him playing at right back all the time? No, it doesn't, because I still feel against better quality opposition, he can get found out. And that's not me being disrespectful. It's not me saying I don't want Ainsley Maitland-Niles in and around the team. It's just the way I feel. I'm yet to be convinced that he's a sustainable option in that position. Let me know what you think in the comments, though, of course. Today's performance was good, but what are your thoughts on Ainsley Maitland-Niles going forward? The two centre halves, Callum Chambers and Sokratis. I think Sokratis showed pretty much what we all know he has. Leadership qualities, solid, decent centre back. He's not a world beater. He's not a top draw centre back, but he is good enough that if he's got the right man alongside him, he can be a really effective defender. And Callum Chambers today was the right man alongside him. I thought Callum Chambers was brilliant. And I had worries about Callum Chambers because he never really made it initially. He went out on loan, first to Middlesbrough, I think, and then to Fulham. And people say he played really well at Fulham, but ultimately Fulham got relegated. And Callum Chambers wasn't really playing in the heart of their defence. So I had my worries about this. But again, another player proved me wrong today. Callum Chambers was fantastic. I thought he looked really composed. His positioning was good. He was alert. He was aware. And so I thought he made a really good partner for Sokratis today. Nacho Monreal did okay. Standard Nacho Monreal performance. Guendouzi did okay too, I thought. And I'm normally quite critical of Matteo Guendouzi. I did feel, though, at times in the first half that Arsenal was struggling to make that transition between the defence and the midfield. So getting the ball into those midfield players in positions where they could turn and face the opposition's goal and start moves off. And I felt like Guendouzi and Xhaka in the first half were both quite sloppy in possession and were both poor in terms of making options for the defenders. But while we're on the topic of the defense and those transitions, I want to talk about the goal kick thing, because we know that the rules have changed. We know that goal kicks now can be taken within your own penalty area, so your players can wait in there and you can play it short. Now, I had a problem with the way we started last season, in the sense that we were putting ourselves under lots and lots of unnecessary pressure. And it feels like just because this rule is coming and you can play it short, we're going to be doing it even more often. And you don't mind it when you've got the right players. You don't mind it when there's very minimal risk. But unfortunately, there is a risk with the way we're trying to do it. And we don't necessarily have the ball players at the back to play that way. That's why I think that David Luiz is such a good addition, because he is someone that can do that will confidently bring the ball out of his defense. So yeah, that irritated me a little bit in the first half. I felt like we were putting ourselves under unnecessary pressure. And then when the ball was going into the likes of Xhaka and Guendouzi, they couldn't hold it, or they couldn't move it on to that next phase. And it was proving to be a little bit problematic. Henrik Mkhitaryan got absolutely pelted by Arsenal fans on social media at half-time in particular. But for me, what you've got to look at is Henrik Mkhitaryan can be wasteful at times, but Henrik Mkhitaryan gets into those positions. Henrik Mkhitaryan creates those situations with his movement. And I'm going to come on to Nelson in a minute, because, I don't want to swear on this podcast. I try not to anyway, but I felt like people were absolutely sucking him off today. Sorry for the term, but he wasn't that great, in my opinion. He was okay. There were flashes, there were glimpses of him picking up the ball, twisting and turning. But for me, he was playing in sort of an inside position. He kept drifting inside. And when you're a right-sided player on the left-hand side of the pitch, I'm going to bring this up on the screen so I can show you what I mean. When you are a left-sided player playing, with your right foot, you'd think that he'd pull right onto that touchline, so that when he does receive the ball, he's got the freedom of the inside of the pitch. So he's got space to run into. That was something that Pep Guardiola taught Raheem Sterling, and Raheem Sterling does really well. That is something that Pep Guardiola has often spoken about, and Thierry Henry's spoken about how useful that was to his game too. Pull right out onto that touchline, receive the ball, and then you've got the room and the freedom of the pitch to go inside and drive at people on your stronger foot. And I felt that Reiss Nelson kept drifting inside too much, and I didn't really like that. Not to say that he was bad, though, that would be harsh. That's over the top. It's just a small observation and something that I'd like to see change a little bit in his game. Joe Willock, I thought in the first half particularly, was sensational. I thought he worked really, really hard, made things happen. He tracked back to defend as well, made a couple of really good challenges, and was always looking to be active and always looking to be busy and not hiding. And I really like that in young players when they don't hide from receiving the ball. And so Willock was brilliant. I do think that in the second half, though, Willock's legs went. And I also think that Reece Nelson's legs went. And they, of course, they were both replaced. Willock was replaced by Dani Ceballos, made his Premier League debut for the Arsenal. And at first, his first 2 or 3 touches were quite poor. The first one I remember, literally the first touch, he tried this back heel or this sort of flick, and it didn't really come off. Arsenal lost the ball, and you're thinking, here we go again. And then the second one, he misplaced another pass. But as the game went on and as Dani Ceballos warmed up, he really, really impressed me. He looks really, really composed on the ball. We've seen that he can carry the ball, and he's a ball player that can control the tempo of a game. And that's something that Arsenal have been missing, in my opinion, ever since Santi Cazorla went. Or since Santi Cazorla got injured, I should say. So really pleased to see Ceballos on, and I really like the look of him. Mkhitaryan was taken off for Gabriel Martinelli. Now, I found this one a little bit strange because when you think of Martinelli, you think of a striker. So to bring on a striker to play on the left-hand side seemed a bit, unusual. But again, Martinelli showed that he can do the job, that he can put a shift in for the team, and that was pleasing. And of course, Nicola Pepe, our £72 million player, came on. And I'll be honest, his little cameo wasn't as impressive as, say, Ceballos is, in my opinion. I thought he looked a little bit rusty, looked a little bit unfit. Nicola Pepe, there was one situation where he isolated the fullback, and I wanted to see him just show that burst of pace, a bit of acceleration, and get past him. And that didn't happen. But, we know he's not fit. We know that it's very early days for Nicola Pepe. He's not trained with the team a great deal as of yet. So, of course, we're going to remain patient with him. There's no question about that. I mean, overall, I thought Arsenal's performance was okay without ever being really good. But at the end of the day, we got the 3 points. It's a win on the road, something that was pretty hard to come by last season and the season before, and a clean sheet. We only managed 1 clean sheet on the road last season. So to have hit that mark already, it is, I'm not going to say it's impressive, because we were away to a side who many people feel will be sort of drifting just above the relegation zone come May. But it was a game we should win, and we did win it. And the performance wasn't exactly inspiring. It wasn't getting me off my seat. It wasn't anything like that. But you'll take the 3 points. And I think as long as Arsenal will end up in a Champions League position come May, there won't be too many complaints. Definitely not from myself anyway. So that's that. Let's move on to the post-match stuff, because we already mentioned, didn't we, that Mesut Ozil and Sead Kolasinac were left out of the squad due to further security concerns. And it was reported last night that Mesut Ozil's property was there was an attempted burglary. Sorry, those guys, I don't know if it was those guys that were involved in the initial incident, but that is something that the police are investigating. And of course, there was an incident between some people and Mesut Ozil's private security staff at his property. So of course, he was shaken up. Not entirely sure where Sead Kolasinac fell into the story. Not sure if there was any incident there, or if it's just because they've both been involved in the whole sort of thing together. But I think Unai Emery did the right thing there, because family comes first, and it's more important than football, no matter how much we love the game. And if those players don't feel comfortable leaving their families at this stage because of what's going on, then I'm absolutely okay with that. Granit Xhaka was the Arsenal captain today. Granit Xhaka wearing the armband, of course. He's been named as one of Unai Emery's captains. I'm expecting that we'll hear there's probably another couple more additions to that. Shkodran Mustafi was left out of the team. out of the squad entirely, and it looks as though he will be on his way, providing that somebody can, of course, make an effort. Make a bid or an offer, I should say, that falls in line with what Arsenal value the player at. So we expect Shkodran Mustafi to probably leave. But going back to Granit Xhaka, because lots of you have been talking about him leaving too, I don't see that happening. I think Unai Emery really values Granit Xhaka, and he was sloppy at times today, and he was driving me absolutely crazy. But you can see why. Unai Emery thinks that this guy is very important to the team. Now, let's go over and have a look at what Unai Emery had to say post-match. Here we go. Just going to share my screen with you guys again, to those of you watching live. So Unai Emery was asked on an away clean sheet in the first game of the season, and he emphasized the point that a win is more important. He wants to win, and yes, clean sheets are great. It helps, of course it does. But, that's kind of neither here nor there if you pick up all 3 points. And we'd like to see Arsenal become a little bit more watertight defensively. Of course we would. But as Unai Emery says, it's all about the victory, isn't it? Unai Emery was asked about having whether or not he had enough senior defenders, and of course the performance of Chambers. And he went on to say that for Callum Chambers, it was a very good year last year because he got game time. He said that they played him as a centre-back in a 3, in a 2, and they played him as a midfielder. So he gained some really, really valuable experience on that loan during that loan period. So it's good to see that Callum Chambers has, of course, come back. On how Mesut and Said are, and if they could feature against Burnley, Unai Emery said the club is managing the circumstance. We want to be with them as soon as possible and with normality in training and normality to be ready to play. I don't know now if they will play next week, which is interesting because this saga seems to be rumbling on, doesn't it? But Granit Xhaka, in his role as captain today, did dedicate the victory to them. And I was pleased that he did that because whilst people may not particularly fancy him as a player, he's shown the right leadership qualities there in terms of making the point that, the team are behind them and stuff. And everybody is, of course, showing their full support to them. I'm not going to read through the whole press conference because you can read it yourselves here, of course, on Arsenal.com. I'm sure lots of you saw the post-match interview on Sky Sports too. And of course, Emery was asked about why he left the new signings on the bench. And with David Luiz, he said that David Luiz did preseason with another team. He's okay to play physically, but he only trained completely with us yesterday. Friday, he only did 30 minutes with us. So it's understandable, why those guys were of course left out. And the fact that we got a result without them is a positive sign. It is a result that we should be feeling positive about. Like I said earlier, hardly the type of performance to get you up off your seat, but we got all 3 points, and that is the main thing. And the conditions were difficult too. Spoken to a few people that were up at, of course, St James's Park today, and they kept speaking about how bloody horrible the weather was, and all sorts. So of course, difficult circumstances. He was also asked what he made of Nelson and Willock's performances. He said they are young, they need to get confidence, they need to get experience, but we need to be winning, which suggests to me that they're not going to be given opportunities to play just for the sake of it. It's about winning first and foremost. It's about the good of the team, and then from then on, if you can include them in that and they're playing well enough to be a part of that, great, happy days. But it is about winning primarily, and it's about Arsenal achieving their goals. Right, let's head over to some of your questions on Twitter. Some of you put some questions on our tweet, which I'll go through first, and then I'll come to your live comments for those of you that are involved. Richard Wright says, do you think some of the youngsters should start ahead of Mickey or Xhaka, or should we have some experience? I think experience is undervalued at times, and I think that, and I've said this over and over again, and those who you watch regularly will know that I always say this, the hardest thing to get out of young players is consistency. So I won't rely on those young players to produce week in, week out. I know that the case is we can't always rely on some of the senior players either, but I think you've got more chance of finding a level of consistency with them. Let's see what else we've got here. Stephen Oliver says, to me, it looked like Mkhitaryan was playing like he knew he'd lost his position in the team with Pepe coming in. Should we give him a chance at central attacking midfield against Burnley if Ozil's still unavailable? I don't see why not. I don't see why not. I think that with Mkhitaryan, there were parts of his game, particularly in the second half, where I was impressed. So he picked the ball up, he drove. There was a bit where he skipped past a couple of players, but then the pass was too long. And there were just moments where it just wasn't coming off for him. But I think he had some bad moments today, Henrik Mkhitaryan, but I don't think it was anywhere near as bad as some of the reaction has been on social media. And I don't see how that's helpful anyway, to be honest. Right, let's head over to your live comments in the chat. Here we go. Russ Morgan says, a good away win for me, Harry. 3 points is all that matters. I was a bit concerned that none of the summer signings started, though. You're right, Russ. Great performance. The win is all that matters, of course. I said great performance. I meant a great result. Definitely not a great performance. But yeah, like you said, 3 points is all that matters. And I wouldn't be too concerned, mate, about the summer signings not starting. I don't think I expected many of them anyway. To get a game from the off, at least. Brett the Gooner says Mickey had a shocker. Just been talking about that. I don't think it was a shocker. I think there were some poor moments, but I thought that he was just as, if not more effective than Reece Nelson, and nobody's talking about him playing poorly. So I think it's a little bit harsh. Brandon says solid performance. We always in control. I'll take a 1-0 away from home all season. Agree with that. Wasu says, hello, Harry. 3 points, clean sheet and slim score. I would take that all day. Roy Cropper says, Nelson's interplay was class and one-touch passes was class and has obviously gone unnoticed. No, I don't think it's gone unnoticed, mate. There were, as I said, positive moments and nobody's criticizing Reece Nelson. I think there were some positive moments. But when you see a player with so much talent, you always expect more, and I just felt like it was a decent performance from Reece Nelson, and he should take credit from that because he is a young player and he's not as experienced in the Premier League, as some others, and he's done really well. But I don't think we should be going overboard about this kid. I don't think we should be relying so heavily on him, and it feels like the fans have got this vision of Reece Nelson coming in and being the savior, and that's not going to happen. Reece Nelson has still got a long way to develop, so just calm down on that. That's kind of my only point. Jay says Ceballos looked great when he calmed down. Agree. I think he definitely grew into the game as it went on. I've already touched on that anyway. Paul Myris on Mkhitaryan. Mickey was terrible. Confidence and mind shot at the moment for some reason. Jay also says Pepe's had about 2 training sessions since July. It was clear that Pepe is not match fit. You could see that from the minute he first touched the ball. So, I didn't expect any more, if I'm honest. I just hope we can get him up to speed as quick as possible. Matt Hale says, Alba was clinical. Aubameyang was clinical as always. Agree. Brilliant. Running out of good things to say about Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. When he finds himself in those type of positions, he often does the business, and I expect him to be right up there or thereabouts anyway when the race for the golden boot really hits up come the end of the season. Limitless FA, fantastic result today with so many players missing. I think we did well to graft out a win. Absolutely agree. No question about that. He also says Mickey's first half performance may have been the worst I've ever seen. Yeah, it wasn't great in the first half. I definitely think he got better in the second half, though. And, there were other not great performances too. And I just feel like it's a little bit, people are just going in a little bit too hard on Mkhitaryan, in my opinion. Tommy O'Donoghue says, I said today I'd take a dirty 1-0 win, but we do have a lot of work to do. Saying that we had a lot of players out or on the bench, team will look much different in a few weeks. Agree. Healy says, very happy with Chambers, simplified his game and played the percentage passes. Yeah, I thought that Chambers was very good. I praised him right at the top of the show. Cannon Fodder TV, another fantastic YouTube channel. Head over to them and subscribe. I didn't think Xhaka had a bad game, just didn't really impose himself. I think my issue with Xhaka in the first half was that he gave the ball away a couple of times very loosely, and that was a little bit irritating. But other than that, he was pretty solid. He done okay, and you know that Granit Xhaka can pick out some wonderful passes at times. There was one where he slid Aubameyang in, wasn't it, in this second half, sorry. So, you know, we know that he's got the ability. It's just a lot of the time it's a concentration issue with him, I think. Deepak Patel says, Willock showed us what Ozil should be doing in terms of running forward. Thoughts? It's quite obvious that Willock is a player who likes to drive with the ball, and Mesut Ozil is a player who likes to pass the ball. And I just think these comparisons are just... I wouldn't make them, because I think they're two different players. And yeah, you can say they're both going to play in that number 10 role, but for me, they're two very different players. I still believe that Mesut Ozil is the most talented attacking midfielder that we have at the club. And for one circumstance or another, we're going to have to deal without him again for a little bit of time. But, you know, I really think that if we can improve on the foundations of the team and let Mesut Ozil have that freedom that he requires without people standing there going, oh, why isn't he tracking back? Then, you know, he is a huge asset to this squad and to this team. Let's see what else we've got here. Luke Howard says, our defense really surprised me. I thought our defense was very good today. I thought that they all done well, but, you know, I'd advise caution here because Newcastle were absolutely toothless in that final third. They had a couple of moments, didn't they? A little spell where, you know, the crowd started to get behind them and stuff, but realistically, did they test Burn Leno? No, they only had 2 shots on target. Just like us, nobody really, you know, put the other team sort of up against the wall and really gave them a hard time. So difficult to judge the defense based solely on today's game. But, you know, you'd hope that people like Callum Chambers have gained that experience. Rob Holding will be back soon. You hope that David Luiz can integrate in the team quite easily. And yeah, so just going to quickly run through my player ratings, and that'll be it for this live edition of the podcast. Burn Leno, I'm going to give him a 6. Maitland-Niles, I'm going to give him an 8. Chambers 8. So Kratis 7. Monreal 7. Guendouzi, I think he just made a 7 for me. Xhaka, I'm going to give him a 6 because I didn't think his first half was good. Mkhitaryan, I'll give a 6 as well. Quite a bad first half, a few poor moments, but like I said, I did think he improved in the second half a little bit. Willock for me gets a 7. Ceballos, when he came on, gets a 7 as well. Nelson for me 6.5. I didn't think Nelson was that good, genuinely, and I just don't get what all the fuss is about Reece Nelson's performance today. Didn't really see it. Aubameyang, again, kind of on the peripheries of the game for a lot of the time, but when it mattered, when the moment came, he took it. So I'm going to give Aubameyang an 8 too. Pepe, I'm not even going to rate for that cameo performance because I thought it was quite clear that he wasn't ready to be on the pitch. Martinelli did pretty well, worked hard, you know, linked up quite well with Ceballos, pulling out to that left-hand side and sort of trying to waste time and things like that, which is always nice to see when it's your team, of course. Let's see. What else? Have we got any more comments? Marco Arrigoni asks, can you see Xhaka being in central midfield next season? If he's at Arsenal and Unai Emery's in charge, then he will be in our midfield because there's obviously a real respect between the two, and Emery obviously values him. He's made him the captain. He obviously rates this player. Whether we do or not is a completely different story. So as long as Unai Emery's there, I think that, yeah, he will be in that midfield. Right. That brings us to the end of this live edition of the podcast. Big shout out to everybody who's tuned in now, watching live, whether it's on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube. And to those of you watching us back later on, thank you so much for your continued support. Hit the like button, hit the share button, leave us a comment. And if you're listening to the audio only, please do leave us a review. We'll be back tomorrow with a Chronicles AFC Daily. Until then, take care.